You have 250,000 followers, which is very high for a hairstylist. How did you build such a large Instagram following?
So I think got fired, couldn't work, got a salon that was way out of my budget. So a girl that I worked with reached out to me. I turned my garage into a salon. Do you want to come rent my chair from me? And I was like, are you kidding me? Do you think I'm going to come work in a garage?
I've been there.
Well, 5 weeks went by and I couldn't keep up with clients messaging me saying, what are you doing? Like, you just suddenly are gone. Called her back. I said, hey, can I come see your garage? I think I was 24 at the time. So I had kind of tried a couple things. And I remember telling my parents, I'm going to switch things up again. I'm going to go to hair school. And they were probably like, big eye roll. Next thing you know, I was hitting six figures. As a business owner, a salon owner, a service provider, people ask us a lot of things. At what point do you say yes and no? And it's using that discernment that you have within yourself to say,
Welcome to the Millionaire Hairstylist, where our mission is to improve the financial well-being of creative professionals. Our guest today is an absolute treat of insight and inspiration. Farhana Premji is the owner of the luxury salon in Alberta, Canada, the Beige Label. She has over 250,000 followers on her personal stylist Instagram account and brand partnerships with companies like Redkin, Arc Scissors, and BehindTheChair. She's a model citizen showcasing building an iconic personal brand that drives demand for your services, building brand partnerships that bring in both revenue as well as authority for you as a stylist and as a professional, and ultimately funneling that into a hyper-successful salon that attracts high-end clientele and high-end staff. Farhana is going to get into the specifics of all of these things, and we explore her story, the lessons she's learned along the way, how she's built this personal brand for herself, and so much more. This is an episode that will inspire you and encourage you to grow yourself and your business in 24, and I'm really excited to get right into it. Let's not wait any longer. Here's Farhana Premji on The Millionaire Hairstylist.
What a beautiful background.
oh, thank you.
Is this your salon?
It is, yeah. I thought I'd just come here because my dog would probably be a little noisy if I did this at home.
Do you know, Farhana, why we reached out to you?
Tell me.
Because Robert Cromines, when we asked him, who else should we have on the podcast? And he said, Farhana Premji.
Aw, I love him.
Yeah, we do too.
He's amazing.
He is.
We
What
love
an
him too.
honor. What a legend.
Well, you come highly regarded. So if we could start with just your story, where did this all start for you?
Oh my God, I feel like every hairstylist story is just like so crazy. So I'm just coming up to 15 years in the industry. Take it back, some personal pivotal moments that kind of all happened, but went to a really academic high school and finished that. And I was like, I'm going to go be in the beauty world. Like, I love girly things. And so I thought I'll do aesthetics or hair. And if this is like any indication of like the lazy girl in me, I thought I'll do aesthetics first. It's cheaper and quicker. I was going to do both, but I was like, let me do aesthetics first. So became an esthetician. My parents put me through school, started working at a salon spa, and I was only 17. And I found myself wanting to hang out with the hairstylists. They were just more lively and vibrant. They were just a little bit more my speed. I kind of liked them a little more. I don't know. They didn't have to wear like lab coats. Things have changed. I get it. But that long ago, that's what the look was. And so I was 17 and I actually had to take a short medical leave. I had a fibrous little lump in my breast, which was super scary at 17. Opted in for surgery just to have it removed for peace of mind. And I remember telling the spa manager, I said, I'm going to need some time off. And she said, okay, take the time off that you need, and then let's put you on the front desk so that you can still get some hours. And I was like, sure, okay, that's great. Put me on the front desk at the salon, and the spa was in the back, and I loved it. I loved inventory. I loved answering the phone, booking, scheduling, like folding the towels. I loved it all. Fast forward another little bit, a friend of a friend said, hey, why don't you take that to the corporate world? I live in Calgary, Alberta, so oil and gas is very big here. It's like our big industry. So she said, why don't you work the same thing, receptionist, but like a big girl job? So I said, okay. So I moved into corporate. I ended up staying there for 3 years. I loved it. They put me through school. I went to university for HR. Little did I know that was going to come to be so beneficial for me. So I did that. I remember every day, like going to my little downtown office, corporate girl era. It was really fun. I'd walk by this salon, this really big downtown salon. And I remember just thinking, I love those hairdressers. They're fun. They look cool. They dress well. Like, I want to go back to that world. I miss that world. I think I was 24 at the time. So I had kind of tried a couple things. And I remember telling my parents, I'm going to switch things up again. I'm going to go to hair school. And they were probably like, big eye roll. My sister was about to go to medical school. So one daughter's like aspiring to be a doctor. And I'm like, no idea what I'm doing. So they said, okay. They supported me. My dad was a little reluctant. My mom was super supportive. I went to school, finished school, and I went to apply at that same salon, the one that I kept looking at every day when I'd walk through downtown. They rejected me. They said, hey, we're building a new location. We're on a hiring freeze. Thanks for your resume. We'll reach out. I waited. I stayed at home. I waited for a month, no call. So I started just working at Canada's largest chain salon here is called Chatters. Typically, they're in a mall. There's like over 100 locations. Like it's a massive salon, super successful business model. And so, I started working there doing what we call mall hair, like revolving door of clients, no real structure at the time. And I loved it. I loved that too. I had really great hours. I only worked 32 hours a week. I worked in a mall. So I'd take my $20 of tips every couple of days I'd get and go blow it at the food court. And I don't know, it was just like, it was fun. I liked that too. And I made some really good friends there. I started working with Redkin because, as you know, Chatters is like Redkin's largest client. So I already got kind of like familiar with Redkin, fell in love with it. I had nothing really to compare to. So and then I remember the salon called me and they said, hey, we've opened our location. Would you like to reapply? We're hiring assistants. At this point, I had been doing hair for about 6 months at Chatters. And I debated even reapplying because I was kind of enjoying this like little life that I created at this like small salon. It was really fun. And I remember thinking, I was charging $20 for a ladies cut at the time. And the lady who worked next to me, she had been doing hair for probably 20 years and only charging $10 more. And I remember thinking, how does this make sense? How am I fresh out of school? And she's been doing this for a lot longer. And like, we're not really our price structures, something just wasn't computing for me. So I said, okay, I think I need to become a little uncomfortable if I want to grow. I remember the promise I had made to my parents when I decided to leave corporate and go into hair is I said, I was going to be really good. I said, I'm going to try really hard and I'm going to make it. So I thought, all right, I'm going to have to take a step back. So I went back to that salon. I reapplied. I got the job as an assistant. And they said to me, all right, well, it typically takes an assistant about a year to year and a half to get through 100 models. Like, get through your 100 models and we'll put you on the floor. I said, okay. So I did it in 4 months. Yeah.
I saw that coming.
Yeah.
I was like, I know where this is going.
I don't know where like the lazy girl in me went because all of a sudden I had this drive. And I think I just really fell in love with what I was doing. We don't have an underground system in our downtown here. We have something called plus 15s where like corporate buildings have like a walking tunnel. And because I work downtown, I went to Staples and I printed these 5x7s that said, book with me at this salon. It's $50 for a color and the haircut will be free. And I would just hand them out at lunchtime because I knew the foot traffic that place got. There was no Instagram at the time. I think I had Twitter, but like didn't know what I was doing. I don't know. And I built my clientele and I was doing free hair all of the time. Like I would work my 6 to 8 hours with my educator, my stylist, and I just grinded it out and I kind of loved it. And next thing you know, I was hitting 6 figures very early in my career. Michael Cole, you guys might know him, the co-founder of SSB. Like he's like the Summit Business Consulting Group, like massive. He knows Robert Cromeans too, I'm pretty sure. He brought me down to Vegas for Redkin Symposium and put me on a stage and was like, there's this girl in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, who's doing these crazy numbers. And I had no idea. I was just so laser focused on what I was doing. Another pivotal moment, like I was working at the salon. I had actually been there for 8 years. Where things really took off for me, I think, was I ended an engagement. I was with someone for 10 years. And the week after that ended, I posted my first hair photo. And then it's almost like Instagram and balayage like happened overnight. I don't know. Like it's just like this like explosion happened. So it seems. And I rode the wave. I didn't really know what balayage was. There was no education. It was a lot of just self-taught, figuring it out, visualizing. I don't know. It was just like literally just like learning off of like making mistakes. And I think I learned to kind of like embrace the mistakes and make them better as a hairstylist. And then it kind of translated to becoming a business owner.
I want to pause you there in the story and I want to get to the salon and the growth of Instagram and there's a million things. But Cash, I just have to point out, this reminds me so much of your story and your relationship with salon culture and wanting to be part of that.
Yeah. I mean, the front desk, that was how I got introduced to it. First front desk, $6 an hour, 15 years ago.
So fun.
It's it's a long time, but I feel like You sort of mentioned something funny. You said that Instagram and balayage, it just sort of happened, it exploded. It's not the way it worked for a lot of people, but it did for you. Because you do things exceptionally well. When, like Jordan was saying, you've done some things like down to the brand aesthetic, the image, the colors, like every small thing you do seems to be done with a high degree of excellence, which I'm really, really curious about how you wind up doing. While our starting stories sound very similar, I'm like dying to know more about how you're doing this all and maintaining such a high standard amongst so much business that you're doing. I mean, you're still behind the chair, right? Yeah, still working. Yeah, business.
So let's go to that point in your story. You break a 10-month engagement. You post your first hair picture.
Which I was engaged for 6 years too. So
oh my God! See, I knew there were some parallels here. And by the way, Cash was an assistant. Came to New York, was an assistant. And worked for free doing friends' haircuts over the weekends. I mean, he was doing everyone's hair. He was doing my hair just to get more hair.
So you can see how low I went.
Oh, way down.
The levels I had to stoop to get a career doing Jordan's
But
hair.
even Cash figuring out wigs and the way you rode wigs to doing some crazy big celebrity hair because of your work with it. I don't know, there's just interesting parallels. But Farhana, let's go back to your story. So you end an engagement. You post your first photo. Where does your aesthetic sensibility start? Because that's clearly something that's been a big part of you and your brand. At what point do you really start thinking very, very focused about what you want this external aesthetic to look like? And where did that come into your journey?
I think when I think back to it, I built a 6-figure business as a commission stylist, doing root touch-ups, long hair, and men's hair. Like, I didn't do a lot of custom dimensional color. It wasn't my thing. I don't look like your typical hairdresser. I've never bleached my hair. I've never had highlights. I've never sat with foils. And I didn't really have a clientele because there was no way to self-market. I didn't really have a clientele that didn't kind of already look like me in a way. So I wasn't getting the blondes. And so when I started doing a few color corrections and this like lived in look was just like really where we were seeing it was like Us Weekly. Like there was no Instagram really. It was just really just kind of seeing it like celebrities kind of moving away from the Kelly Clarkson highlights to these like softer lived in looks. And it really spoke to me. I heard the word hair painting and I was like, let me figure this out. Back then we were just doing a traditional lightener. We didn't have all the clay lighteners that we do now. And I kind of wanted to have this like everyday commercial Victoria's Secret gorgeous girl vibe. You know, I resonated with that type of a client. I just didn't have the eye for like those editorial, really edgy looks. I appreciated them, but I couldn't get myself there in terms of like doing it at a full service salon. And so I think because I was never really doing it, I almost like put myself in like this different category where, you know, people would call in and say, I'll book with the girl with the long dark hair. I saw her at the salon. She did this amazing blowout. I really mastered the blowout. And so those women that walk out with that blowout, which has now come back, they're walking with like a little something different than what they came in with. And so in a big salon where you have so many eyes on you, you kind of stand out a little bit, especially when you look a little different, you have a different clientele. And so I think maybe that's where a little bit of like my aesthetic came in terms of like the work that I was doing. And I loved being so minimal that it was impactful, so minimal that it was memorable. I wanted the
Say more about that. What does that mean?
I think I really wanted to curate this look that was so just an enhancement of who someone was or something that somebody already had. It was just enhancing it, that it left a memorable, lasting impression on them. I realized that there was a place in the market for girls who just wanted a little bit of work done. They didn't want transformational hair. I think there was this big wave of like Guy Tang who revolutionized balayage for us and like social media and YouTube hair and all of this stuff. And it was like these gorgeous transformations that were done in 8 hours. It looked like it wasn't a lot of work, but it was. And how do I make that into like an everyday scenario with less is more techniques, being so intentional and strategic? And I just had to get really smart, especially working at a commission salon where I was double, triple booking. Like I just had to get smart with it. There was no other way. Otherwise I was going to get left behind.
Wow.
Okay. So one thing I've noticed, one thing, you dialed in your own aesthetic and your personal preferences. And you said, okay, I'm different than everyone else. Like I don't want to do that. Time-wise, it's not going to make sense. Effort-wise, it's not going to make sense. That's not me. And this is something, Jordan, we talk about a lot, which is like, you basically became you founded your brand identity on what your identity was and who you attract. And you said at the beginning, like, I was really interested in girly stuff. And, as a hairdresser, so was I guess. So that makes two of us. But I think what a lot of people struggle with, and what I'd love to hear more from you on, is establishing that identity, getting clear on it, and then making decisions in your business for how to translate the identity that you have, who you are, and making that your business so that you attract the right people.
Hey, if you're enjoying this podcast and you want to further your financial education, you can do so for free. Go to millionairehairstylistpodcast.com, where we have an entire library of free financial lessons aimed at the well-being of creative professionals, including a lesson on why budgeting is a terrible, soul-sucking way to manage your money and why allocation is a much wiser system for managing your resources. Go to millionairehairstylistpodcast.com and sign up today.
How was it that you were so clear on who you were, what your look was, and that you very clearly said, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not this?
Where did that come from for you? That
not
that
everyone's clear on that.
around identity.
Yeah, where did that come from?
I think it just came from a place of just feeling what's right. Something that would resonate with me is just something that I consistently show up for. Like, it wouldn't make sense to me to do. I remember this, I did like a balayage mermaid color. It was like purple and blue. And it was the aesthetic I liked in that it was soft and pretty and long and mermaidy, but the color was completely not my palette. And I remember I finished her hair and she said, do you want to take a picture for your Instagram? And I was like, no, not really. I'm trying to do, but I don't want more of you.
Yeah.
That's such an important line, though. Like, don't tell the market that you're doing something that you don't want to be doing.
There was another moment that happened early in my career. I had a big clientele of men. Like, I had a big clients. I worked in a downtown salon, so there's a lot of corporate male clients. And I never posted on my Instagram that I did men's hair, but they were like my filler appointments. I could double book them. I could get them in first thing in the morning, last thing at the end of the day. I could like pack in my schedule with all these filler appointments. And I remember my one client, Sean, I had been doing his hair for years. And I posted his wife's hair. They didn't know they both saw me until she showed him, hey, my hairdresser posted a photo of my hair. And he's like, that's my hairdresser. And she's like, what?
No way.
So then he said to me, why didn't you tell me you do this other thing with Instagram? And she was like, I didn't know you do men's hair, and Lolo, my husband's hair. And it was in those formative times early in my career where Instagram was really becoming like a marketing tool, where I was like, this is so interesting that I could have this whole separate business that's like fueling my income, but I have this other thing that's fueling my passion and my brand and the aesthetic that I'm actually trying to create. I didn't know what that was going to turn into. I didn't know it was going to turn into what it did, but I was trying to juggle all of the things of working in a salon where you're having to do all of the things, but you're still trying to figure out, maybe a little bit about what you want to specialize in, which again, then there wasn't as many specialties at the time working in a salon. So yeah, it was just interesting how that kind of all happened now that I'm like speaking about it.
But you seem like you were very intentional and very thoughtful. And I'm sure obviously, you're describing years of decision making in a very small conversation. So obviously this is an exploration you went through. But were there people speaking wisdom into your life at the time? Did you have a Yoda person in your life that was giving you advice? Or because even the way you talk about where you get the men in at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, you just seem to have an intentionality and a thoughtfulness about the work you were doing that clearly accelerated your growth. Does that entirely on your own, or were there people that you were watching or listening to, or who were speaking into your journey?
I don't really think so at the time. I think I just found that I'd have to become strategic with the way I would build my day. I think it came from times of challenge. When I would have these shifting your career from having a lot of smaller appointments to now there's a demand for these longer appointments. How am I going to manage? Maybe it's the people pleaser in you where you're like, I still got to cater to this business, these clients that have built me to where I am today. I can't just let them all go and somehow make it in a way. So I remember turning my Tuesdays became my standalone haircut days. So if you wanted a standalone haircut, I would only do them on Tuesdays. I was tired at the end of the day, but I could still accommodate those clients. And if they didn't fit in with that, that's kind of how I started to slowly shed that away so that my Thursday or Wednesday to Saturday could be filled with like my longer appointments. So I started getting kind of, I guess, strategic in a way of just trying to managing and handling a lot. I didn't really have a lot of mentors at the time of, someone telling me how to do all of this. I had salon owners that were all about me making money. They were on board with me making money until they were not. Like I ended up eventually getting fired from the salon. But
Tell us.
Yeah. So I was their highest earner. I was doing like $30,000 a month for them. And they had made so many accommodations for me. I mean, they've got like 3, 4, 5 locations now, I think, over 150 staff, probably, like big salon. And you'd go on their website to book, and you could book like their different locations, like their 3 main salons. And then I had my own book Farhana appointment button, because I was doing things differently, and they were accommodating that because I was pulling in the income. The revenue was really high on that. And so they would make these accommodations. And then it got to a point where they just couldn't anymore. And I get that as a salon owner, when they had an established business of 15, 20 years, and they have this one employee that's constantly testing their limits, constantly trying to say, let's do things this way. I want to do it my way. I have so many ideas, almost to like appease the rest of the team that they had way longer than I did. I had been there for 8 years, but they had some people that were there for 15 years since the day they opened. I think they just finally had to let me go, and I would have never left had they not done that. So it's just so interesting how that kind of all happened. But I think it was me constantly testing. And as a salon owner, I get it now. You're kind of like, this was great revenue, but it's something is happening within the culture of the salon that this one person is making it a little challenging.
You don't sound like a people pleaser.
I mean, I am, but I'm learning, I've learned to strike a balance on people pleasing, not overly accommodating, and still really standing true to who I am. I don't love the word boundaries. I feel like that word is so tossed around, but I guess it's another way of saying boundaries. Like I am a people pleaser. I feel like one of the classes that I've taught is how to be a magnetic stylist. I think that's a really important way of like being a likable person.
Can that be taught?
What's that?
Can that be taught?
It's challenging to teach it, but there's a few key things that I feel like people can turn on in their mind to make them, you got to be likable, but also kind of holds true to the things that you have put in place. And all of the boundaries or practices or policies we have for ourselves come because a problem arose that we had to make a change, right? So when you can learn from all of those to then become this person who is a people pleaser by nature, but can also say, yes, you can have that need, and yes, I can say no, and kind of having a compassionate way to have that conversation and everyone feel heard and loved is I think kind of where people need to kind of strike a balance in all of that craziness.
The way that you've done this, the way that you've approached this is really uncommon. So I'm really curious what your tips are if someone wants to do this. So let's say you're a people pleaser, which so many hairstylists are, because that's the source of a lot of the joy that you get from offering transformation. So it's sort of intrinsic to the role. If you're not satisfied by making someone else satisfied, then you're probably not going to have a good time serving people. And the role is serving people. So you're serving people, but in a lot of your story that you just told, you're pretty contrarian, and you like to do things your way, and you're pretty clear on the way you want those things done. And to be able to stand up in your salon or talk to leadership and say, and be a little abrasive, as well as a people person, takes a lot of clarity on what's important to you, a lot of clarity on what you want to see done, where you want to go with your career, what's acceptable and not acceptable. And I'd say this is probably one of the biggest struggles with people who are really good in the service industry at serving people, who then burn out because they are convicted about the way they want to see things done, but they're compromising that constantly. So if someone wants to be a magnetic, likable person who pleases people, but also is very clear and vocal about what they want done, what are some of the tips that you teach that can help hairstylists or even any service provider that's providing services for people? I think magnetism is powerful, that they can sort of like take home and say, oh, I can set a quote boundary on what I will and won't do, while also being a really highly magnetic and pleasing person.
I think this is so polarizing, but I think not being a rigid person is huge. Being really open. And I think as an entrepreneur, a business owner, a service provider, not being rigid in what you're able to do, what you're capable of, and what's actually possible are two very different things. So when you're really rigid, you often will say, this isn't possible, when it's actually, you're just not capable of it at this moment because you're not tapping into the resources. So I believe all of this stuff just stems from the mindset, and it just comes down from getting out of your own way, which is, again, is just another sometimes word that we just hear, like a little catchphrase, get out of your own way. But it really is that getting out of your own way and not being so rigid. And sometimes it's not, as a business owner, a salon owner, a service provider, people ask us a lot of things. They ask us to bend. People have big asks. And at what point do you say yes and no? And it's using that discernment that you have within yourself to say yes to the things that are making a difference and no to the things that aren't. I think, the biggest thing I would say is being open to change in like an evolutionary manner, and not just making really big decisions based on what someone's asking of you, but really sitting and thinking about how this impacts yourself, your clients, your business. When those three things are checked off, it's a hell yes for me. When something's missing, I'll sit with that a little bit more and figure out, what's lacking here. What am I compromising on? If this makes sense for the client and the business, but not for me, well, that's a no. If this makes sense for me and the business, but not the client, that's also a no. So having like that little checklist, in your mind.
That's a really interesting trifecta to consider.
Yeah, it's like a great way of like making a decision. And I think another way of like positive thinking is like, when you're debating between two things in business, or really even just coming down to like the level of making a decision for a client, is thinking about the best possible outcome of both ways. If you say no to this client, what's the best possible outcome? If you say yes, what's the best possible outcome? And weighing it out from that point. And then kind of leading in that way as well. It's really hard to have difficult conversations as a people pleaser, but I think there is a way to do it with kindness and compassion, and still not bending on the person that you are or what you're able to do. And sometimes learning that you can bend a little bit and there's still a happy outcome at the end of that. I'm not going to
Can you think of an example of something recently you said no to because it didn't align with all those three things?
Something that I've said no to. Do you mean as an owner or like a stylist?
I would say either. Along your journey, what were some of the things? I mean, you already kind of mentioned not wanting to do 8-hour transformations and recognizing you were more interested in a more lighter touch. I love that example. But are there other things decision points you came to where you said no because it didn't align in the way you're describing?
Oh, wow. So many things. I sometimes even take it down to like brand partnerships. This might make a lot of sense for me and my business, but is this something that's going to make sense for my clients, the clientele that I've already fostered and nurtured and worked so hard to get? Now, if I start posting this weird brand partnership because they're cutting me a check, what is that going to do to the clients that I have built a relationship with? I think that's another one. Sales reps coming in wanting you to carry something in your salon, that might make sense to your clients, but does that make sense as a business move, or even to myself? Does that even align with the person that I am? I've said yes to things and then realized, nope, never doing that again.
Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, something even so small as like, I remember we had a stylist and she really wanted to do red hair. We're called the Beige Label. We do lived in, minimalistic. And she said, I really want to do it. And I said, look, this isn't something I'm going to be able to coach you on. So if you think you got this, let's bring in the color. So she wanted to use a specific color. It was $120 for this full range, a sealer, this acid bonding, whatever. The client no-showed. And I remember thinking, that's so annoying. Like, now the stylist had asked me to do something. I said yes. It was against our brand. We spent the money on the client. This was like very early on as a salon owner. And I realized, like, why am I trying to appease the stylist by saying she wanted to do that when she knew she's working at the Beige Label? You get to a point as a salon owner where you start saying, this is everything that we have and we have to offer. Does this work for you? Rather than saying, I need to constantly be bending the things that I'm doing. I have such a curated brand, you look at the brand and you kind of know what we do. You're not going to the Apple store and buying a Macintosh. It's similar to that. And so kind of learning to when to say yes and when to say no. And then sometimes saying, you know what, let's not do that as a paying client. Let's make that maybe a content day for you. If you want to like have a creative day, like let's talk about that if you're trying to fuel something. So just like having the discernment within yourself on what's working and what's not. But they always come from a learning opportunity, like a failure, as you would say, something that went sideways where you're like, never doing that again. You know what I mean?
I'd love to know what some of your do's are. If you had to say, these are the things very clearly, this is what we do. And then I'd love to hear some of your don'ts. I think it could help a lot of people develop some clarity about their own do's and don'ts, because there's just so many creative entrepreneurs who are looking for an opportunity that they just try to like, okay, well, that sounds like a thing that could pay me, or that sounds like a path I could go down. And it's blaringly obvious that the people who succeed really fast choose a very defined path. And that includes a lot of I do's and I don'ts. What are some of the I do's, like we absolutely do these, and what are some of the we do not do those that have created your entire brand image and deliverables?
Again, as a salon owner, right?
Yeah, as a salon owner.
Okay, do's that we do, we respond to every single phone call, text, and email. Like no ghosting clients, no matter how much we don't like them.
Speed to lead, man. I love it.
Yeah, that is not okay. I think it's so weird when people just don't respond, even if it's just your appointment's been booked, you're getting your confirmation. Yep, your appointment's been canceled. Rather than just getting the notification from the app that the appointment got canceled, follow up with a personal touch. It's those little small details that make you memorable to your guests, right? It makes them keep choosing you over and over again. So that is like a non-negotiable. We speak in a certain type of tone to our clients. Our punctuation, our grammar in all of our copy is like 10 out of 10. That's like a non-negotiable for me. This is very important for me in raising the bar and the professionalism in our industry. Otherwise, we are taken for a ride as just hairdressers. Do you know what I mean? So that's something that's taught to everyone in our company, admin, even our stylists when they're communicating with clients over DM. As an owner, you don't have control over that, but we constantly coach to saying, bring them back to the salon. We can handle the booking for you so they get the true Beige Label experience in that concierge service. So that's something that we do all the time. Something we don't do is, well, we got lots of don'ts. We don't allow repeat no-shows, which I think is pretty standard. We don't allow...
Tell me more about that. Why not? Tell me more about that. Yeah, I think a lot of people need to hear that.
Yeah, so no repeat no-shows, even if they've paid. I had a client who no-showed me twice. She paid in full, made a nice little chunk of money off her, and she continued to want to rebook. And I was so kind to her, and I was just like, Sarah, girl, love you. Thanks for paying me for my time, but I really want to do hair. And now you've given me 2 times of I'm actually not doing hair. It's not even about the money. I want to do hair. I got a wait list of clients that I want to get in. You're taking the opportunity of me actually wanting to do hair. So either you're going to have to like figure this out. I love you and I love your hair, but like you can't just keep booking appointments and then paying and thinking that's okay. So having almost like a tone like that, like, girl, love you, but like you're messing me up, is sometimes a way to talk to those clients that you have a great relationship with, but you still need to set some sort of policy in place. It's kind of switching the tone from business casual to a little bit of like, love you, but
tough love.
Exactly.
I'll get a rapid fire question. Do you break up through call or text?
Either or. I'm okay with either. I sometimes prefer text just because I like to have a little bit of a paper trail. Smart. And like I always also text and email from a place of if they screenshot it and post it, I'm fine. Like I've taken PR. I get it. It's fine. We've never had a client ever say that the salon was rude to us or, you know, they undermined me or they didn't hear me out. Like that's never been an issue. Like our communication's pretty strong. So those are like some of our non-negotiables that we're pretty high. That's like a high priority for us is like the way we communicate with our guests.
I want to just touch on let's go back to your story for a second, because we left at the part where you were doing $30,000 a month for a major salon and they fired you. So pick up the story there and get us to the part where you create Beige Label. And how did that come together? Because obviously this is a big jumping off point for a lot of hairstylists that decide they want to open their own salon. Is that what you did next? Were there other salons you worked at? Take us through that story.
It's wild. So I got fired. I walked home. I live across the street from the salon that I worked at. I bought my first property there and I still live there. I thought I was going to retire at that salon. That's how dedicated I was to them. I still I see them from So I walked home. I called my mom. She didn't answer. And I was like, what are you doing other than not being my mom? How do you not answer? My sister answered. And I said, I got fired. And she's like, what? And I said, they fired me. I don't get it. I'm like teaching a class for them next week. I have like 12 weeks of clients booked out. And I remember my sister said to me is they can take away your job, your clients, but no one can take away your talent and the love that you have for what you're doing. And I remember just sitting with that. And it was such an emotional moment because my sister's not overly emotional, but like in that moment, she really struck something within me. And I was like, she's right. I have 8 years behind me of really fostering a clientele it was also in that moment that I knew the power of social media, because it was that day that I went and bought my very first domain, XO Farhana, which was my MSN name when I was 16. And I just
oh my gosh,
made a domain. I didn't know what a domain was.
XO Farhana?
Yeah, it was my MSN name. And my email was cutie with the booty. So
you built it. By the way, just so everyone understands why that's funny, because you're listening to this, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that still your Instagram handle?
Still my Instagram handle.
Wow. You took your high school MSN name all the way to the top.
Yeah. And I'm incorporated as that now. Like, that's not just it's like my enterprise is named XO Farhana Enterprises. It's so crazy. So I went and bought this domain, and I made I didn't know what a newsletter was or a sign up form. Like, I didn't know. This was so long ago. And I remember I just made a post when I got fired, and I said, hey, everyone, I'm on to doing a few more things. Follow me for updates. Didn't know what I was saying. Didn't know what I was doing. In 24 hours, I had 700 people sign up. Like, that's a lot for an email list in 24 hours. A lot. In one Instagram post of some hairdresser that works at a salon. That's when I was just like, oh, there's people watching what I'm doing. Like, I have a clientele. Didn't know what I was going to do next. It was around that time that I was being asked to go teach in salons my techniques, because I was only teaching internally, and I was getting asked to go teach salons. So got fired, couldn't work, got the lease of this salon, had no idea anything about budget, got a salon that was way out of my budget, but I was like, okay, the lease is this much and I bring in this much. I can try and float. I think I can try and cruise through this. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had no income. So a girl that I worked with reached out to me. She used to work at the salon, and she said, hey, I turned my garage into a salon. Do you want to come rent my chair from me? And I was like, are you kidding me? Do you know who I am? You think I'm going to come work in a garage? That was my ego. I've been there. And I said, heck no. I'm used to having assistants around me. Now you want me to come work in a garage? Well, 5 weeks went by, and I couldn't keep up with clients messaging me saying, what are you doing? You just suddenly are gone. And how do we book with you? And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Called her back. I said, hey, can I come see your garage? I went to see it. I was like, this is great. It was cute. I ended up working there for 6 months, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, because she was also in her own salon. So I rented it from her 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. I'd literally take the money and take it to my contractor to build the salon. That's all I was doing.
Wow.
I was in her garage, never once set foot in her house because it was a detached garage. And so I would bring in my blue plastic IKEA bag of dirty towels home every day, wash them and bring them back the next day, fold my towels, clean my chair bases. It was the most humbling experience from going to working from a big salon with 2 assistants always following me around to in this garage space. And so I think that I got fired in April, and my salon didn't open till December. So I finished working in the garage in November. So I spent a good amount of time there. I think if I spent one more day, I would have gone crazy. It was the smallest little plate size window. And I just did hair all the time. I was just taking money for hair. I incorporated myself. So I was making sure I was paying my taxes, but it was just going right to my contractor. And I opened the salon with just me and an assistant. And then I slowly started to grow my team. But there was never this plan to become a salon owner. I loved coaching. I loved teaching. I taught my very first class that summer in Manhattan, from Calgary, Alberta, Canada to New York. 4 people showed up. That's right. 4 people.
Wow.
But that was my first class. And then to be on stage in front of 5,000, a few years later was just, I had these moments of being what is my life? What is happening? It was around that time Redkin.
I'm sorry. I just want to say I like this though, because I think it's easy to hear the condensed version of the story, the $30,000 a month book. Then you have the salon now, what we do, we don't. And just remember that there's those seasons in that story where you're doing hair out of a garage, where 4 people show up to a class in Manhattan. So it's not this constant smooth sailing, constant wins, DJ Khaled hustle thing. And it's you have these down moments. You have these moments when you're not sure, and you stuck with it.
Yeah. That can be a real punch in the gut, by the way, to be growing an Instagram following and sort of be in your success cocoon, so to speak, where you're I'm booked solid, I'm moving in a good direction. I'm in New York, and you show up and 4 people show up. I've been there, by the way. It sucks. It can be quite a punch in the gut. That's what happened? How'd you handle the 4 people showing up? What was the internal dialogue? Because I'm sure you expected more, right?
I expected more, but I just wrote it out. I remember just being I was on that trip too that I got nominated for my first award. And it was crazy. Like everything was just happening, swirling around me. I didn't really know. I think I was just riding the wave. I was like, I got fired. I got no one to answer to. I don't know how I'm going to pay for this salon, but I'm in New York. Let's go get some nuts for nuts on the street. Like, I don't know. It was just like,
good. Take it in stride.
Yeah. I was just just enjoying it. I think I don't think I could foresee the challenges that would then ensue after opening my salon and just the next phase of my career really taking off. I thought I had pulled myself out of a dark place of a broken engagement, getting fired from a salon after being there for 8 years. I was like, all right, 4 people showed up to my class. A win is a win. It's fine.
Yeah, that's fair. That's good.
In comparison to what else was going on. That's amazing. Yeah. Good perspective.
So
really healthy perspective.
Continue the story. So you open the salon, you have an assistant, and where does it go from there? You have one assistant. It's just you. Is this the same location you're still in today, 806?
I am. We renovated just this year. So I have had my salon. In this April will be 7 years since I signed my lease. So we just renovated last summer. And yeah, I slowly built my team. You know, people come and go. I learned that very quickly. You know, I've had conversations with salon owners in a similar situation with me where they had a really big, a following, a brand. They had their own personal brand that they just thought, let me just open a salon as an extension of who I am. And you realize quickly that some people are there to just ride the wave and ride your coattail, learn what you have and leave. Some people are there because they want to be part of a really cool brand that they believe in. And, you know, all of it has been so much learning, so much growth in that. You know, when I'm asked to coach other salons, I'm like, I don't even feel like I should be because, you know, I'm still learning. I'm still kind of on this journey as well. But there's been so many things that I've taken away from having different types of employees coming in right out of school, while still in school, coming in with experience but no clients because they're moving cities, coming in with experience and clients because they're moving salons. Like all the different types of stylists that are out there, I feel like I've had the opportunity of working with and seeing kind of what works and what doesn't work. And there's all types of, you know, stylists out there. And there's some that want to grow and there's some that are just really happy to just ride the wave and they want to coast through and they're looking for a place to also just have some work-life balance. I realized very quickly that not everyone has the hustle that I have. The standard I have for myself, I can't always project that on other people. And I often say, I can't want this more than you, but as long as you want it, I'm here for you. And knowing that they have a safe place to just exist and be, and then they have at the same place, they have a place if something kicks in within them and they want to go in high gear, I'm here to support that as well.
I always want to get really tactical. And Jordan, I want to interrupt the story because I'm really curious about how, Farhana, you've dealt with this issue. So as an entrepreneur and as a creative entrepreneur, typically we're the driving force in the business where we create the standards. They're usually higher than the people who join the team. We sort of expect so much of ourselves, and it's really easy to put that onto other people. But then there comes the moment where you have to make the decision of is this... When do you draw the line at my standards are too high? Is 80% good enough? You know, those types of things you have to address as you bring people into your business. How do you know when it's the right person and when it's the wrong person and when it's you?
Oh, great question.
That's such a great question. I think I'm introspective enough to first put the blame on me in a soft way. I'll first look inwards and say, what am I doing to contribute to whatever's derailing here? Whether it's good, you take the hit. Whether it's bad, you take the hit as a salon owner, right? And that's hard to sometimes do because you want to take all the praise when things are good, but sometimes you have to also say things are going a little sideways. Something's feeling off. And what am I contributing to allowing this or enabling this to happen? I've also learned that it's never sometimes someone is right or wrong. I think it's sometimes seasons of their life could be right or wrong. You know, you could have start off really mid, and then they turn into this incredible employee that you're like, I did not see that coming. You really surprised me there. Or they start off really strong, which is probably what we see more of as an owner. They start off really strong and somewhere along the way, maybe something internally is happening within themselves. And all of a sudden you're like, this is not the person I hired a year ago. What's going on? And I think it's really hard as an owner to just dismiss that and not listen and not understand what's going on. And you still want to run a business, but you still want to be compassionate to what's going on with them. and checking in with them to make sure that they're okay with where things are at. So if they've plummeted or things are, their numbers aren't where they used to be, checking in to say, is this okay with where you're at, or are you trying to get back to where you are? I can't be a mind reader and think that everyone wants to feel growth every single month, month after month, the way I want to. Some people are okay. Some people see a $20,000 month and they're like, oh, next month I can take a couple weeks off. I see $20,000 a month. I'm like, I got to do 30 next month. Like, that's just the person
exactly
that
how
I am. I want to feel growth. I want to feel a pinch on my time and my resources, where some people are like, oh, I had a good month. Let's chill for a bit. So kind of like, I think, again, like striking that balance between when to call something out and when to let things just be is like really important as an owner and a leader. That's someone that's, yes, I work on my business, but I'm still in my business at the moment. It's hard when someone's not right. I feel like they eventually they weed themselves out, and it's hard to do. It's hard to see. It's never fun. Even if you wanted them to leave, it still hurts. I think when you have a team and people work together and we spend so much of our time together, and you hire them because we're all value minded, we want some of the same things. And when something doesn't work out, you kind of sit there and think, what happened? What you wanted on day one is so different than who you are today. But just being okay with that, I think, has been like a big learning for me, and just letting it be. It's you can't get so, I think, wrapped up in the, I guess, the highs and lows of it. I think you just have to sometimes remain neutral in all of when things are really good, to enjoy that, but know that something is, I've had months of being like, oh, I have such a great team. This is so amazing. I love coming to work. And then something happens and you're like, come on, like what happened? Like, and I think as an owner, we have so many things on our plates, and I'm dealing with really big things on a launch of a new business in one day, but then dealing with a client who is mad about her bangs on the same day. Like the vastness of our challenges are so, it's just so great. And it's so much bigger than what our employees deal with on their day to day, that sometimes just having a little bit of grace of like what their smaller world feels like in comparison to ours. And not to say that their world is smaller, but what's on their plate in terms of work could maybe.
Okay, fantastic. So this is actually a good inflection point, because I would be very remiss if I left some really important things out of the conversation that I know our audience will want to know more about. So when people go and look at you on Instagram, which I certainly hope they take a look, because you're such a great example of all the things we've discussed, clear branding and building your personal brand. You have 250,000 followers, which is very high for a hairstylist. So I want to ask, let's start there. How did you build such a large Instagram following, and what has that done for you? And what advice would you have for people who are trying to build presence on social media?
So I grew it very slowly at first, and then it grew very quickly after that. So I'd say my first, 50,000 seemed like it took forever, years. And then the more I was educating and on stage, working with brands, being featured in articles or reposts, I felt like there was a lot of traction happening. I do also feel like I have a really big audience of people who are not hairdressers. I know this because when I'm doing Q&As about hair, there's a lot of people that are like, not a hairdresser, but so invested in this like transformation you're doing, or not a hairdresser, but love the content that you're posting. And so, for people to engage with that, you kind of know that there's double the amount that are just watching who aren't actually engaging. So how did I do that? Was that the main question? Like, how did that all happen?
You're sort of answering the question, and that leads me to my second question, which is, you mentioned a lot of cross-pollination, brands and reposts and being featured in articles. So
yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So I used to think that when you build an audience, you sort of you're consistent and you show up. But then I realized when you show up to an empty room consistently, it doesn't grow like that. And I think what you tapped into was sort of PR and exposure through different channels, meaning you grew your account not just by posting every day, right? That's not the only thing you were doing. You went out there, you met real people, you partnered with brands who gave you greater exposure, you went on stage, which gave you greater exposure, and you sort of start showing up everywhere. And I feel like that's a common story I hear when people's like reputation starts to take off publicly, like their Instagram starts to grow. It's not a single strategy. It's not a single action growth strategy. you implemented and were doing a lot of things that contributed to the growth of basically accumulating an audience. And it's there's a lot of fallacy, I think, out there about how you do that well. And the way you explain that, it's so funny. You breeze through things like it was just so simple, and you make your message so simple and concise that you make it sound easy and like it's a no-brainer. But these things are not simple, and a lot of light bulbs, I bet, are going off with like, oh shoot, yeah, it's you can do other things. There's like an entire PR strategy that can be implemented to build your Instagram. You can get out there and do other things that can help build that. So I wanted to pause on that for a second, because
of course
you make things sound so simple and easy. And I think that's really amazing that you built it consistently through like massive action. The things you did are not easy. That's not easy work to get up on stage tons of times, travel, educate, and build that one follower at a time. So I just want to, I'm sorry.
So yeah, where did that PR sensibility come from, Farhana? And how did you grow that?
You know, I don't know if it's the PR per se, as it is just this work ethic of doing more than what's expected of me. I lend that so much to like my immigrant parents who came from East Africa to Canada, and, you know, them kind of telling me and my sister when we would have our first jobs of, don't complain, you have a job. Do you know how hard that is? You have a job. Someone's employing you. Someone's paying you. And so maybe there was like this little bit of like brushing the problems under the rug type of mentality that comes from that. But there's also this appreciation and gratefulness that comes from that, of head down, work through it. It's really not that bad. You got into a little tiff with somebody today at work because you didn't sweep their station, and you only swept the others. Little drama things like that, what I learned early on in my career, to just like let things go and then do more than what's expected. So, you know, when a brand would reach out and say, hey, we want you on stage and we want you to talk about this, I'd add a little bit of extra about this. I would kind of like lean into the feedback that I'd get these. I remember a coach once telling me, a business coach, saying that he gave me the analogy of a duck on water. He's like, you make it look like you're just gliding through, but no one sees like how hard you're working under. And he's like, I don't know if you mask that or you just do it so naturally, but you also make things look easy so people can want to come and work with you. And then they think that they can do it too. And they don't realize like how strong your mindset is and how clear your focus is, and the daily things that you do that are maybe setting you apart from other people that keep your head really, you know, that tunnel vision. And so it kind of, I guess, made me realize that, yeah, there are things that I could be doing and making things bigger challenges than they actually are. So maybe that's why I sometimes breeze over things, because I realize that there's much harder things that I could be dealing with too. The challenges I have today, I don't want the same challenges next year. I want to have so much growth that my problems next year are going to be different problems than this year's. I'm not saying that there's ever going to be a time where I'm not going to have problems and challenges and pivots in my business, but I want different ones next year. That's how much I want to grow. And so I think having that mindset and just like rolling with all of the learnings that happen, and not just I take it seriously, but not so seriously where I'm going to focus and I'm going to lose days just stewing over something. It's like, stew over it, you know, I'll cry about it and I'll be sad about it. And then it's like, all right, let's get going here. Let's move on.
If you're listening this far into the episode, I hope that means this conversation with Farhana has brought you as much value as I suspected that it might. Would you help us let others know that this podcast is out there? All you have to do is leave a review in the podcast platform of your choice, or if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. Thanks so much. What was that first brand that you made any sort of professional relationship? It sounds like it was Redkin. And how did that come about? But maybe I'm wrong. But how did that come about, that first brand relationship?
So I'd say on just like a relationship wise, it was Redkin, but there was no payment involved. Affiliate marketing wasn't really even a word at the time. Brands were just sending people who were posting on Instagram little, what we now call PR boxes. I think at the time it was just like swag, we'd call it, like merch.
Free stuff.
So, yeah, cool stuff. Amazing. You're not getting paid for it. There's no requirements. There's no expectation. They would just send it. And I learned that I like to show those kind of things. I wanted to show like, this brand sent me this. Thank you so much. I can't wait to use this new Shades EQ color. Or Pravana, I remember they made this thing called the blonde wand, where you like use their special bleach and you put this like thing that looks like a flat iron over the section and it like processes the color in 90 seconds. I don't know where that thing is anymore. It was a cool concept, but I remember posting about it and then somebody else sent me something. So it was like this compound effect of I would do one post and a brand would say, oh, she's posting about brands. Let us send her something bigger. My relationship with Redkin, the first impactful relationship came about in 2017, right when I got fired. And they reached out to me. They had no idea. It was like the time in my career I was the most alone. Got fired, no friends, no clients, no employees, nothing. And they reached out to me. They said, hey, we're picking a few people. We want to send you to the Redkin L'Oreal offices in Manhattan. Are you interested? And I was like, sure. So they handpicked 11 stylists from around the world. I was the only Canadian. And I got on the plane, didn't know where I was going. I just knew I was going to Manhattan. And we went to the L'Oreal offices. We went to Google, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. They wined and dined us for 48 hours. We stayed at the Standard. It was the coolest experience of my life. And I remember being like, what is my life right now? I remember crossing the customs border and they're like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm going to like Facebook or something. He's like, huh? And I was like,
this is 2017. This is early. I mean,
early.
This is early.
Yeah. And so that was my first like partnership with them where they were doing something with influencers. Didn't even know that I could use that word at the time. I think the word has kind of come and gone. Now we call ourselves content creators or something like that. And so that's kind of where that started. And I ended up getting approached by different brands. I went on tour with a couple brands. They were paying me to teach and travel. And I told Redkin, there was no brand ambassador program in Canada at the time. And I said to Redkin, I said, hey, these brands are like sponsoring me to be on their stage and I love teaching. And is that something I can do with you? And they said, no, we don't really have that. Like we have educators and artists, but we don't have brand ambassadors. Do you want to go through the educator program? And I said, no, because I have my own way of teaching. I don't want to teach in like a structured way. I want to teach in my way that I learned because it's working for me. And so that just got tabled. Nothing happened with that. And so I went on tour and then I remember I was getting these checks from different brands and it was really fun. I got to meet so many people. I made some great relationships with people in different brands. And finally, I got in touch. Somebody got in touch with me. I think it was 3 years ago. And they said, we're finally bringing the ambassador program to Canada. And you were handpicked to be the national brand ambassador for Redkin.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, this is a dream. Like I've loved Redkin. I've worked with so many brands and I've come back to Redkin. They know that. And I think where that came from is when they brought me to their Redkin L'Oreal offices, I got to see the operational side and the offices of like what goes into the brand. I think as an end user of the product, we just think, oh, it's like, okay, cool. 9V, amazing, great. Use it on everybody. And then you realize like the clinical operations that goes into testing product and what's everything that goes into distribution and product development, marketing, packaging. Like I had this newfound like appreciation for the brand, the science that's behind it, the innovation, and them including us in product development. Like that was a really cool experience for me. And I think that's where I was just like, of course, all brands, by the time they become a brand that can be purchase, that's a big deal. To like even have a brand is a big deal. But I think because I saw Redkins and I saw how big they were and all the different types of people that are needed for this company to work, for us stylists, I just fell in love with kind of like that back end of it. So yeah.
That's super cool. If someone said, I really want, you're one of your stylists, they're up and coming, they've got the chops, they're working hard, they're doing good work. Let's set that as a baseline. They say, Farhana, how do I start building brand partnerships? And I'll take it as an aside. One of the things that Cash and I talk a lot about is when you're dealing with an end consumer who's going to pay you to do their hair, you want to establish authority with that customer so that they feel that there's a reason they're coming to you and there's a reason they should listen to you. And so when you can get a larger brand to be in partnership with you, you're building that authority in a way that's really powerful because these are major brands that people are aware of and understand. And so you're able to leverage that in how you represent your authority. And that's one of the things you do super well in your Instagram account. So your stylist is on the floor. They say, Farhana, I love these brand partnerships you're doing. How do I get a brand partnership? What do you say to that person?
Fall in love with the line, like actually know what you're talking about and post about it for free. Don't ask for the check and then start posting about it. Is that?
It's so good. It's so good. I mean, it's exactly Cash, you've done a lot of these brand partnerships. How did that come about for you?
I mean, it's very, very similar. It's basically you love something so much, you talk about it. When you're passionate about something, it's hard not to talk about something, right? And if you're a real creative and you find a tool that helps you accomplish that in a really efficient, especially if you're a creative entrepreneur, right? You're always looking for efficiency, you're looking for better, you're looking for faster, you're looking for the highest quality, and your standards raise over time. So it's like, it's actually tough to find really good stuff. And when you find it, you just get this feeling of like, oh my gosh, like people should know about this. This is the best thing. At least that's how I felt about it and getting into brand relationships. And then people start reaching out and brands start sending you things. It's a very, very similar path for when I was working with brands. But I think one of the things that you said is just, we laugh because what you said is very poignant, very relevant to what there's a big discussion right now among hairstylists in a new economy. Would love your thoughts on this too. Free work. So we went through an era of hairstyling, and Farhana, if you disagree with this, please, you strike me as a person who's not scared to be disagreeable. But here are my thoughts on this. When you're first starting and you don't have a clientele and there's no demand on your time, all you have is time. So that time is not worth anything at that moment in time. And so one of the ways that we talk about building a clientele, which is the way I did it, which is go do as much free work as possible, as often and as frequently as possible to attract awareness about your services. And if what you deliver is good, like crack, like ask any drug dealer. If the product's good, you're going to hook people on it. You give people some free. I'm not endorsing drug dealing or anything like that, but it's an age-old strategy to get people in the chair. So what I did to build a clientele was I did a lot of free work, just like you did, Farhana. And nowadays, there's a little growing sense of entitlement. I mean, maybe it's not entitlement, but there's a growing sense of pride over, I don't discount, I don't do free, I don't do this, I don't do that, when you have like 5 clients. So when I have 5 clients, I'm willing to do anything, like, ethically. And I know that I know my value, know what I'm good at. And so if I can get you in my chair, I'll win you over. And I'll win over 1% of you, and I'll keep 1% of you. And so I know that lifetime value is really important to me. When it came to brands, it was the same thing for me. It was like, I'll post for free. And yes, some brands are going to take advantage of that. And some brands are going to get some value from that. And I'm going to establish long-term relationships. And that's kind of how it started working for me. Farhana, I would love your thoughts on free work and free exposure for brands and doing things for free. What do you think?
I think I'm very in alignment with doing the free when it's in a season of your time that you should be doing that. I think you get to a point where, my line now for when a client says, hey, I used to get a friends and family VIP discount. Why didn't I get it now?
Right.
My line is, I'm at the capacity for discounted services. Like, that's right. I've maxed out the discounted services. Did my mom's hair for free this week. So that means I can't do, that's kind of like my line. Yeah. So now when a brand wants, at this point where our time is more valuable, different conversation, right?
Totally.
But, I think I also struggle with the cancellation policy in salons. The policy for me being that I'm booked out so far, my time is so minimal now behind the chair, versus the same exact policy for a junior stylist who, if you cancel today, she can get you in tomorrow. So why are we're still just filling the book, right?
Right.
So how do you kind of know when to bend those policies and why the policies are in place? I think it's always just defining that why of like, why is something in place? Why do we say you're going to have to pay up front for this service, but not this service? I think just, I do agree that there is this, I don't do discounts, I don't work for free, I don't work outside, I don't respond to DMs on Sunday nights. I'm like, who's going to go find another stylist who's going to respond? Because I'll respond on Sunday night because I want to, right? Yeah. Like, I think there's that mentality as well of, I'll only answer during business hours. Or business hours, I'm doing hair. So I actually have to respond outside of business hours. So yeah, I wish it weren't like that, because I think there needs to be a little bit more of that flexibility with the work that we're doing to create that demand on our time and to put our name out there. The more our clients are talking about us, and you can slowly build that price increase as the demand on your time, as your resources become more limited in what you can do. It's all about supply and demand. This whole industry is a supply and demand industry. And so, I did a lot of free hair. A lot.
I want to put a button on free, and then I'm gonna say the question, and then we'll get to your answer, Farhana, because I want to be respectful of your time. As someone who's always learning and growing, I want to hear before we go what your plans are for this coming year. You talked about not wanting to have the same problems this year as last year. So be thinking about what is ahead for you and for your salon, because I think a lot of people are curious to know where you want to grow and where you want to expand. But I'll just say about free, it's not free. You are getting something in exchange for your time. The first feature film, I work in film. I'm not a hairstylist. I'm a film producer. The first feature film I ever worked on, and I'm weird. I keep a time log of my hours. Like I literally have an app. Cash and I both do this where we track our time to like the 15-minute mark. I did 270 hours of free labor as an unpaid production assistant on that first film. And in my industry, in film, people complain and talk about all the time about no one should exploit you. Don't be exploited. Don't do work for free. If you see someone offering a job for free, and I understand that you should not be exploited. I understand that you shouldn't exploit others. However, when I sat down with the production manager of that film and he said, I can't pay you, but if you're willing to be here, we'll have you. I thought, I'm going to give you my time and you are going to make me hireable for the rest of my career. And sure enough, a month after that film wrapped, I did 6 features that following year as a production assistant paid. So you're not giving something away. You're making a trade. I will give you my time for something, for education, for exposure, for relationships, for my book, for the brand. I'm going to give you my social media for free because I'm building a relationship with you. So you're not taking your time and throwing it down the river. You're making a very calculated trade of what your time can get you besides money.
I love that.
So true. Yeah, I agree 100%.
2024 for Farhana. Tell us about it.
It's going to be wild.
I hope so.
Don't say that every year. This year I've been gearing up for, I know last year was a big year. We did a big salon renovation and like that was a huge financial year for sure. This year I'm in a year of expansion and growth. I can't talk about some of the stuff, but it's a little bit of cross borders work that I'm doing. I'm very excited about. My lips have been sealed for like 19 months now, so I can't wait to share all of that. But in terms of my salon, listening to what my stylists are wanting in terms of them, I'm very aware that they watch me work. And I've always thought that's a bit of a blessing and a curse as somebody somebody once said, you're not going to see Steve Jobs in the Apple store. He's not working in the Apple store with the geniuses. Do you know what I mean? And so I've always thought of that as sometimes a blessing and a curse where I lead by example. So I'm like, well, watch what I'm doing so that you can learn all the ways to have profitable consultations and follow-ups and how we close things and the way we speak to our clients, like watch that. But at the same time, they're also seeing all of the things that I do outside of being a hairstylist. So there's a part of stylists that work here that want some of that for themselves. And so I'm moving my salon into a new phase of a little bit more flexibility and autonomy for them, rolling that out very slowly and very meticulously with a lot of intention and strategy behind it so that it makes sense for myself, the client, the business, and the stylist. So that will be a really big change for us this year. I'm excited to work more on my business rather than in my business, but still hands in hair because I am an artist and a service provider at the core of who I am. And I hope to have a follow-up conversation with you guys next year. I'm sure
I was about to ask, please come back.
Yeah,
tell us how it went. And tell us, we want to shout from the rooftops the people that are spending time to be with our audience and to share with us. And we want to celebrate your wins. So yes, please keep us in the loop on that.
I will. Thank you guys so much. I feel like I need to ask you all the questions now because I'm getting little tidbits and yeah.
Well, I'm sure we have plenty and we've got more room for more conversations. Absolutely. This has been an incredible experience. I've actually learned quite a bit from you today. I'm so impressed with just who you are, the level of clarity you have over what you want, where you're going, who you are, what you want things to look like, feel like, the experience for your clients, your stylists. You're creating win-win-win-win scenarios and environments. And what it sounds like is you're striving for an incredibly attractive culture within your business in adding that flexibility and really listening to your stylists, the demands of the market right now, the demands of the labor force. I think you're brilliant, and I'm sure there's tons more I could learn from you. So I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Amazing. Thanks, guys.
Thanks you so much, Farhana. Talk soon.
Talk soon.
Wow.
Well, she is a gem.
Holy If you're a hairstylist, if you're a creative professional, and you are interested in your financial well-being, remember to like and subscribe so that more episodes just like this one show up in your YouTube feed.